What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. I'm still over here at the studio, so I thought we might as well do just another update type of video because I think we can call this the first wave of cuts have officially been made, but this probably won't last. By the time this is posted, there's probably more moves that are going to be made. So I wanted to dive into this quickly. These videos are going to be short and sweet, right to the point. That way I can get them out as fast as possible. So with that being said, let's get it started. Welcome, everybody, to a video. Glad you guys are here, and we're going to have a few of these potentially from different locations over the next couple of days. But today we have our first wave of cuts. Now, the first video we did was Donovan Peoples-Jones and Caden Davis in that update, but there have been other cuts that have happened since, and also a couple that happened around that same time. Now, over on DoseOfDion.com, I'm updating the cuts over there. I may be a little bit late to some of them, but I'm updating them for me personally, but also if you want to check them out, there is a cut tracker that I'm working on over there in terms of who gets waived, who gets cut. When I see them, I'll update the website. Add on to the Caden Davis and Donovan Peoples-Jones news, we also have that the Lions are waiving running back Zonovan Knight. Don't think that one was a huge surprise necessarily. The running back depth is just loaded, but Zonovan Knight definitely came on as the preseason went along. I think he'd be a great piece to get back on the practice squad. He was on my practice squad wish list. Next up would be probably the biggest surprise to this point, and one that honestly surprised me whenever this was going to take place. Shane Zylstra being waived, the tight end. This one definitely surprised me that Shane Zylstra is being waived. I thought he would make the 53-man roster. Now I wonder if this is James Mitchell potentially going to make the team. It was really like a back and forth between him and James Mitchell getting kind of the top team reps that we got to see in the preseason. I thought Shane Zylstra performed better, especially as a receiving target within those 3 games, but they're different skill sets. So if the Lions did say that they wanted to go with James Mitchell, you're definitely going after a different skill set. You are going after a guy that is an inline run blocker, can be more impactful, not always is, but can be more impactful. Had reps in the preseason where he was able to move guys off the ball. For Shane, you're getting more of a move blocker. Pass protection, again, I lean Shane Zylstra there, but James Mitchell's had a good history of doing that in limited reps that he's done it. And James Mitchell as a route runner to me is not what Shane Zylstra is, but he did do some things after the catch that Shane Zylstra did not do. So it's not like he didn't make plays. He just, to me, isn't the route runner or the consistent separator. He's a little bit more of your big body. So I don't know if this means they're going to keep James because they waived Shane Zylstra. Maybe this means they only keep 2 tight ends. Maybe this means that a guy like Parker Hesse might actually make the team, as you can call him a tight end / fullback because of that flexibility. So I think a couple things are on the table here, but this definitely feels good in terms of the chances of a guy like James Mitchell making the squad. Maybe this also means the Lions feel like they'll be able to get Shane Zylstra back. There's a possibility, but I don't think it's anywhere near a guarantee. If I was another team and I was watching the Lions and I wanted tight end depth, he'd be a guy I grab because he just has a good connection, really good connection with your quarterback really fast, just based on what he did here with Jared Goff. So I hope we get him back. I would love to not lose Shane Zylstra. So this one does surprise me. I'll be honest, this one caught me off guard. Also, cornerback Rashad Wildgoose has been let go by the Lions. Not a big surprise there. Lions signed some cornerback depth really right before the final preseason game, so this one isn't a huge shock. None of those guys really stood out in that last preseason game to me either, so I expect more of that news to kind of come along here. Also, Mitchell Agude, the edge defender, has also been waived. This one I'm not going to call a surprise. I didn't really ever consider him in my 53-man roster, but Mitchell Agude definitely did some good things, more specifically against the run, had some flashes as a pass rusher, showed a little bit of flexibility for the Lions. We talked about him yesterday with Speakeasy. I didn't think there was really a spot for him to get onto the Lions roster. I love the, flash plays you'd get behind a line of scrimmage, but athletically speaking, there was real limitations moving laterally against the run. And again, he wasn't the impact pass rusher that I think, say, guys like Matthew Betts or especially guys like James Houston or even Isaac Ukwu was. And then finally, this one hurts me the most. Center Brian Hudson has been waived. Now, this one, again, not really a huge shock. I had always considered him putting on my 53. I never actually officially did it in any of my 53-man list, but he was like right on the outside looking in. This one is, I won't want to say disappointing because I think we can get him back on the practice squad, and I think after last game, it kind of just proved like, okay, he's not in a spot to go overtake that position, especially if they keep 10 offensive linemen like Michael Neese. He just didn't prove that he was in a spot to do it last game. It was just a shaky start, but I think what he had shown is that he separated himself a little bit amongst the others once you got to really that third-string offensive line in terms of run blocking, and in pass pro, he was very consistent, again, up until really that final preseason game where it was a shaky start. A lot of guys had a shaky game against Pittsburgh. I loved how he settled in. I love how he responded, and he hasn't really shown the guard flexibility, but he has held it down at center. And I think you could make the case that he was better in his totality than a guy like Kingsley Eguakon at center. That being said, though, definitely getting reps against different players.
Unfortunately, I have to jump in here with a voiceover because this move happened as I was recording this video, but Tai Summers has been cut by the Lions, a guy that absolutely balled out in his 2 preseason games, and I really can't help but wonder what this would look like if he was here before the preseason started, or if he was here early in training camp to really prove himself, and how that competition would have played out, because it's not like a guy really gave up their spot. Ben Neiman was great, Jalen Hurts-Maben did an excellent job, but Tai Summers, to me, absolutely thrived, and this is one guy that would be amazing to have back on the practice squad that I would absolutely trust if he had to step into a game scenario. Not gonna say he was perfect in coverage. I mean, there were times, like we saw the pass get behind him in his last game. I think it was like a Tampa 2 coverage, but that being said, we did see with Summers, especially against the run, his flow to the football, some awareness and just control in his game, but also the blitzing upside. He showed flexibility towards the end to play in gaps. Tai Summers put together an excellent 2-game preseason. He just really wasn't here long enough, and the linebacker room balled out. So hopefully we get him back.
Final 2 that we have here as of now is, first off, Pat O'Connor, the defensive tackle / defensive end, which reportedly the Lions want to get back on the practice squad, which is no surprise to me at all. I expected him to get cut, but also it was just because the Lions defensive line was loaded and you kind of just knew who was going to make the team. But Pat O'Connor was one of those guys who was never really electric as a pass rusher, but the fact that he was able to play inside, outside, the amount of like small little plays that he made, but then last week he blew up a couple of run plays, his consistency at the point of attack. I mean, this guy was all over the place against the run, week in and week out. And I remember after the first game, it was like, I remember Pat O'Connor flashing a little bit. All the way the progression to this final preseason game, I'm like, yo, Pat O'Connor was one of the best players on the field. And we highlighted him a few times yesterday in our live stream with Speakeasy. Pat O'Connor was awesome. That is like the ideal get him back to the practice squad. We did our 53-man roster earlier today on Bleacher Report. I think that's how I worded it. Like, that's the guy you want back on the practice squad. It's actually reported that the Lions want him back on the practice squad. So that one makes a ton of sense. Pat O'Connor was great in the preseason for the Lions. He's not a big-time juice pass rusher, but, man, he's got the body size the Lions look for, especially for some of their bigger defensive ends. But his ability to kick back inside then and still be successful, but really play the run with the high motor that he did, Pat O'Connor was awesome, man. And then, of course, Scott Daly, the long snapper. Now, hey, I'm keeping my eye on this because will the Lions go with my bold prediction of cutting both long snappers? I don't know, but one of 2 have been cut, and that is Scott Daly. Now, I think clearly Hogan Hatton is the preferred long snapper. He was the guy getting top reps throughout the preseason, and also some more of the flexibility that he can add. And I think it is a real value to have a long snapper consistent. That way you have that with that whole group together, the consistency between punter, kicker, and long snapper in terms of the holder, the timing. You just want that to be dialed in consistency because a lot of it is about the process. But maybe they do surprise and cut both, but this does make sense. This also could just be simply as like, hey, we're going with Hogan Hatton because he was the guy that was kind of leading the way. And I didn't even notice that until the second preseason game. And I was like, oh, this guy actually is leading the way. Our initial 53 months ago before preseason, I was like, I'm going to put Hogan Hatton on this team. That's going to be my bold move just because of all the flexibility, the linebacker background, the athlete. And then Dan Campbell's like, yo, this is a real competition. And then we start watching the preseason. We're like, oh, Hogan Hatton's getting the leg up here. So we'll keep an eye on something crazy that happens. But for now, Hogan Hatton's the long snapper. That's the first initial wave of cuts that we have. To kind of expand on the receiver thing, again, I just posted the video of a player that I think potentially could make the roster, which was Maurice Alexander. I'm going to spoil that. Go check it out, and I explain why. But I still do think it's a real possibility the Lions may end up with just keeping 4. Speaking of receiver, though, there's a lot of receivers that could potentially be on the move. We saw in the past we traded for Trinity Benson, but a name that's caught my eye early, this is not a breakdown, but it was Tim Patrick. Denver has basically put it out there. We're moving off Tim Patrick, and we're going to see if we can get a trade done, and if not, he'll probably just get released. But if there's multiple teams interested, there could be at least a bidding war of like, hey, it's going to take a 6th-round pick or a 7th-round pick to get him. You're not just going to be able to get him by cut. You know, it's kind of like, hey, whoever's willing to give the most, if anybody's willing to give anything. And to me, Tim Patrick, from the little that I know of Patrick and the little that I've seen of Patrick this preseason, I would be interested in that. I think the Lions could potentially be. He's almost 31 years old, so this isn't really like a long-term move here. And also, 2023 and 2022, he missed the entire season. 2023, torn Achilles. 2022, torn ACL. Didn't see him in the preseason or regular season, which is super unfortunate. That probably has a lot to do with him being let go, because in the preseason, I thought he performed well. Played with the first team for the most part, a lot in a slot role for the Denver Broncos. And in the preseason, I thought he showed off a lot of the ability that the Lions may be interested in. Of course, his build, 6'4", 212. The guy absolutely can go. He can push the field vertically. He can be a threat up the seam, and he gets up to speed much quicker than most big body receivers. receivers where he very quickly can threaten off coverage or threaten a zone coverage backer and push him back into his spot and force guys to flip their hips, especially from the slot. So he brings that value. He also, to me, brings a little bit more flexibility to kind of roll the hips a little bit more, open up some more separation upside. I love his transition ability. Back in his last full season, he had 5 drops that year, but he's typically been a relatively reliable pass catcher. He had some drop issues back in college, but I love how quick that transition is to catch and run. He had the 4 reception game against Green Bay, little touchdown on the beneath route. They used him on cross. There's beneath routes. He did a little bit of work out wide. I don't think his route running is as consistent in terms of like out routes and being sudden and not really giving a tell. There's a lot more shake in the upper body, but there's a lot more like, oh, he's going to break this off. Lean inside. It's not as sudden. The footwork doesn't feel as crisp. You feel that through like in breaking routes where he kind of has to settle himself into the in breaking route where it doesn't roll as smoothly, or as catching a defensive back off balance where they're not balanced and ready to dive and ready for a break. He kind of gives that away that there's an impending break on the way from what I've seen. But the quickness to get up to speed, the size, of course, fits there, and some of the lateral quickness that he brings opens up a little bit of a deeper route tree and release package. I think he's interesting, and he performed well, but they're going to move off of him. You know that they drafted their man Troy Franklin this year, so maybe that has something to do with it. I just think it's an interesting name. I wouldn't give up much for it, but if it took like a 7th and the Lions were like, hey, let's go get somebody, I wouldn't have any problem with them getting Tim Patrick for what I've seen so far for the 30-year-old receiver. Again, you just run the risk that, there's injury history there, but he was a guy that burst onto the scene. And also, stat to leave you with here, against man coverage in his last full season, again, it was a while ago, 2021, in man coverage, he did have 21 receptions on 31 targets for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. He also has an ability to get into the end zone, I think more as a zone spot-up type of player, maybe rather than a jump ball player, but that's kind of what Lions throw anyway, so they would have to maybe gauge whether or not they really feel like they need that kind of aspect. Double moves felt a little bit predictable as well as the route kind of rolled along, but to me, man, like there's some ability here, there's real ability here, and to see that man coverage stats graded as an 82 against man coverage, he's one of the better separators against man coverage in his last full season, and I think the Lions could always use that with inside and outside flexibility, so I'm keeping my eye on Tim Patrick, but that is your first wave of Lions roster cuts. We'll be back with more, but keep in mind these won't be like every player gets cut. I'm doing a video because that's insane. However, when we get like a group, I can come back with a video or something that really surprised me, and this one was Shane Zylstra, so hoping he gets back. We'll keep an eye on that again tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern time is full cuts. I'm going to leave it here. Thank you for watching, and I'm out.